Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, in Team Season Preview 3 out of 32, I was joined by Jeff Reinebold as we preview the upcoming Las Vegas Raiders season. Jeff talks about coaching against Ashton Jeanty last year in college football.
I spent 2.5 hours last year in, I think it was October, watching Ashton Jeanty run through us.
Jeff also talks about the Chiefs and Raiders rivalry.
It's funny, when I was in Kansas City, I remember just how much everybody hated the Raiders.
And predicts the Raiders' overall season record in our win-loss tie section. Hope you guys enjoy.
That's why you don't ask fans those kinds of questions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast for Team 3 out of 32 in our season preview episodes this off-season. And the team we're doing today is the Las Vegas Raiders. And as you can see, we've got a special guest today. Returning to the show is Jeff Reinebold. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great, Andy. How's things back home in the UK? I sitting here watching a beautiful sunrise in Hawaii. So what's it like in the UK?
Not as nice as Hawaii, I'm not going to lie. It's I would definitely switch places if I could. I mean, saying that, actually, the weather's been the warmest it's been in years. I mean, we had amazing weather in lockdown, annoyingly, 2020, and it's never really been a good summer since, whereas this summer so far has been, mid-July? We're recording this on July 10th. It's been a really good summer. It's been warm pretty much every day, not really many rain days that I can remember the last month or two. Well, I just went to Italy the last few days, so it felt warm here in the UK, but when I came to Italy, it was just another level. 38 degrees Celsius. It was, quite warm.
Well, it sounds wonderful. Is Wimbledon going on right now?
Yeah. Not that I've watched much of it. I'm not a massive tennis fan, but yeah, I think we're on to the semi-finals, I think, at the moment. I think they're going on either today or tomorrow. Not too sure, but yeah, we've had the first week and a bit of it, and I think it's getting towards the end now.
So what's the deal now? That it's strawberries and champagne? Is that what you do when you go to Wimbledon?
Strawberries and cream, and then probably prosecco on the side. I mean, I'm not a drinker, but that's what people tend to go down the route of. Maybe the rosé or the or prosecco or champagne with some strawberries and cream on the side.
Nice, living good, man, living good.
Well, I went to Wimbledon 2022, and it cost about, I think, £4 for 3 strawberries. So it's definitely pricey.
Hey, listen, I got to ask you a question.
Go for it.
How did you become a Dolphins fan?
Well, it's actually by mistake, which is a story I love telling. So basically, when I first came across the NFL, loved it, so I bought Madden, and when I started up the game, it was asking me for my favourite team on the game, on the settings, and I had absolutely no idea. I've only got one tie to North America, and that's Edmonton, which is why I'm an Oilers fan in the hockey. But when it came to the NFL, I literally had no at all reason to support any team. It's complete free reign, and then so I was trying to choose teams, and we were going to Orlando about 6 months after buying the game. So I said to my brother when he's walking down the stairs, who's actually a Raiders fan, coincidentally, he said to me, I said to him, what's the nearest team to Orlando? And he tells me the Miami Dolphins, but geographically, it's actually Tampa Bay who's the nearest team to. I should be sitting here with 2 Super Bowl wins, multiple playoff wins, but I'm sitting here with 14 years of being a fan, not a single playoff win, just 3 appearances. So I definitely chose the wrong team, but I'm glad I did, because I wouldn't change my team for the world. But it could be a whole story.
Just consider yourself lucky that you didn't take a right at Orlando and instead of gone south, and you went to Jacksonville. It could be really painful.
To be fair, I get a game every year in London, I suppose. I would get that element. I get to see him every year, but I can't really moan too much. I have been to all the stadiums, so I can't really moan too much. But yeah, no, it's I think, say for a while, I did miss the 2003. I was too young at that point, but I would have got a lot of years of pain before Brady came. I would have got the Jameis Winston show. I would have got whoever was there before. I forget who it was now, and those horrible jerseys they had before they changed them in 2020.
Whoa! Back off now. Those are beautiful. Those creamsicle jerseys.
No, not those. The ones with they're like Winston wore them a lot. They're like they were dark red. They had the black patches on the shoulders. Do you know the ones I mean?
Yeah.
Those ones. Yeah, the creamsicles are one of the best. I will put that out there. But yeah, those ones that Winston wore for his time in Tampa Bay, both home and away, were just one of the worst I've seen in the NFL in terms of regular kits.
Yeah, well, you know what? Tampa Bay has had really kind of a crazy history because, they started out 0-27, if you can imagine that, going 27 games without winning a football game. And then all of a sudden they got decent. I mean, they got to championship round and then fell off the thing again. And they had Steve Young as a quarterback and gave him up. They had brought in Vinny Testaverde. They had Doug Williams. I mean, they had some quarterbacks, but just couldn't seem to, until Tony got there, they couldn't seem to, do it from an organizational standpoint. And I think he did a great job of really fixing that organization when he came in, much like the team that we're going to talk about today, the Raiders. I think this is really a watershed moment for the Raiders in their history because, since Mr. Davis passed away, the team has kind of floundered a little bit. And I think bringing in a veteran hand like Pete Carroll, even though, everybody's criticism is, well, he's 70, whatever, 3 years old or whatever he is. You got to be around Pete a little bit to understand he's got the energy of a 27-year-old guy. And, I think his approach is going to be a breath of fresh air. And, he's a good football guy. And you look at some of the moves they've made, and I think it's pointing in the direction of building a foundation, which is a kind of a crazy thing to talk about, 73-year-old guy building a foundation. But I think he understands how to build a football team better than anybody they've had in that building so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting appointment of Pete Carroll, and I want to get onto that in a minute. But before we do that, I want to get your quick thoughts on the off-season in general. You mentioned players coming in. This includes the likes of Geno Smith via a trade with the Seahawks, Jeremy Chin, Alex Kappa, Raheem Mostert, Landon Roberts, Eric Stokes, and Jermaine Pratt. The main outs include the likes of Gardner Minshew, Nate Hobbs, Marcus Epps, Alexander Mattison, John Jenkins, Trevor Morig, and then you drafted 11 players, and one of the most talked about players was picked first by the Raiders in Ashton Jeanty, going 6th overall, and then you also took the likes of Jack Betch, wide receiver, 58th overall, and Darian Porter, cornerback, 68th overall. So before we go on to Pete Carroll, I mean, there's been a lot of ins and outs, of course, a major one in one of the most important positions in all of sports, in Geno Smith coming in to replace Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew from last year. What's your take been overall on this Raiders offseason? Because, yeah, it's been a lot of change, both on the field and off the field.
Well, I think, and I have some friends that do work for the Raiders right now and have worked for the Raiders for the last few years. And I think everybody recognized in the building, including Tom Brady, who's a member of the ownership group and, is at least being talked to and listened to as he talks, gives his input about how to build a football team that will sustain over time. I think they did it better than anybody in New England in recent NFL history. The biggest thing is they needed to clean this room out. They needed to get in there, and there were some good players that you mentioned that they let go. Morig's a good player. You're going to lose good players, but I think when you look at the sum of what they added compared to what they lost, I think it's a positive. And you look at some of those guys that you talked about, when you bring in an Alex Kappa, who, for example, is a solid, I don't think he's a great NFL player, but I think he's a very, very solid NFL offensive lineman, and I think he's a guy that gives them, especially in the middle of that offensive line, maturity. He's been there, done it at a high level. So, the Raiders, to me, and I think this is every team, Andy, we look at, first of all, you start at quarterback. Who's your quarterback? Is he good enough to win for you? And then second of all, you go to the big guys, the offensive and defensive lines. And so when you look at the Raiders offensive line, for example, Colton Miller's a good place to start at left tackle. Solid NFL offensive tackle. Now, I don't think he's a great player. I think he's a solid, good football player. And then, Jackson Powers Johnson at center, right? I think he's got a bright future in front of him. You put Kappa next to him. That's a veteran who can help him because, you got to remember Powers Johnson's still a young kid. And, the question is DJ Glaze at the other tackle. That's been a problem area for the Raiders. But if this offensive line can perform, I think, up to its capabilities, I think they're going to be able to move the football. Now, the reason I say that is I spent 2.5 hours last year I think it was October, watching Ashton Jeanty run through us. I mean, he is as good as advertised and maybe better because when you do personnel, one of the things you talk about, okay, who's the like comparison? Who does he compare with in the league? Who does he play like? And there aren't very many guys that have the ability and to both beat you to the corner and turn the corner and beat you for 60 or run through you for 16. And Ashton Jeanty is incredibly powerful. He's not very big. He's probably 5'9", really, because I stood next to him and I'm 5'9". But certainly he's a Saquon Barkley-like guy to me. Really thick in his lower body, extremely strong, has the ability to run through tackles, has great contact balance, great vision, relentless competitor. If he's good on his third carry, he's going to be better on his 33rd carry. And if you know Pete and you know how Pete likes to have what Pete's football teams are all about is, number one, you better have a power running game. And I think Ashton Jeanty gives them not only a power back, but he gives them a guy that can hit a home run anytime he touches the football. So that to me is the biggest offseason thing that they did was taking Jeanty. When Jeanty was available to the Raiders, I mean, I don't know how fast Pete can sprint anymore at 72 years old, but I'm sure he sprinted to that up to that dais to get on the phone and call Ashton and tell him he was a Raider because he's perfect fit for Las Vegas.
Well, you think about the Marshawn Lynch days at the Seahawks in the time, and of course, the decision not to run with him in the Super Bowl is one that's probably haunted him ever since that game happened. And yeah, kind of you mentioned there you are the defensive tackles coach in the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors team in college football, and you obviously. I didn't realize then that you played against obviously not Marshawn Lynch, Ashton Jeanty for BYU, Boise State, I should say. How obviously he's been one of the biggest stars. I think the likes of him and Abdul Carter were probably the two best prospects coming out of college football in the draft. How long did it take you to realize how special he was? When you're seeing him on the field and you're lining up against him, you're probably scheming a lot for him due to the position he plays and what you were coaching. Just how many snaps did it take you to realize how special he is?
Well, I think you realize how special he is when you watch him on tape as you're preparing for them, right? So we watched him he played Georgia Southern, he played Washington State, he played Oregon, he played good people, and particularly Oregon, which was a playoff team. And he rushed for 200 yards against everybody. I mean, it's incredible. His production was elite. And like I said, his strength, his contact balance, his ability to be as good in the fourth quarter after 20 carries or 25 carries as he was in the first quarter on his fifth carry. And, you know, very few backs, especially guys no bigger than he is, because I don't want to say he's not big, because he's thick, he's strong, he's muscular. You look at him come out, he walked out on the field before the game, and he had his half shirt T-shirt on, was cut up just underneath his ribs, and he had his sleeves cut off on his shirt. And I said, that's the way I want to look in the morning. Because, I mean, he has six-pack ripped. He had a big vein running down the middle of his bicep. I mean, he could tell he was a full-grown man. And then you saw how, like I said, how strong he is at the point of attack. We had him. I mean, we really did a good job against him, except for there were 3 runs he had in the game, right? And, you know, one of them was a 58-yarder where he bounced off our safety. Our safety came up, had a clean shot at him, hit him flush, just couldn't get him on the ground. And then he outran the corner. That kind of contact balance that transitions into long speed, those are rare guys. There are a lot of guys, big, strong backs that are hard to tackle, but there aren't a lot of backs that are hard to tackle. And if you miss them, you better, it's over, because he's going to outrun everybody else. There was another run that he had late in the game. It was a really good football game, right? And we are battling to get him stopped at the end of the game on the last drive. And they ran the ball off tackle and really didn't block the play very well at all. We had two guys at the point of attack free, and both guys unloaded on him, and it was a hellacious collision. And he kept his feet moving and somehow got out of the thing. Like, it was one of those deals, like almost like a rugby scrum. All these bodies were around each other. You had heard the collision, and he's straining in to get the extra yardage, and he pops out and goes for about 40 down the sideline. So those 2 runs really were the ones that were the signature runs in that game. And, you know, the other thing is, you got to understand, everybody gave him their best shot. Everybody schemed to get an extra man in the box and have a free guy that, you know, that they couldn't block, and all of the things that you need to do against a great back. And he performed against everybody. He did the same thing to Oregon that he did to us. He did the same thing to Washington State that he did to Georgia Southern, you know, to Fresno State, to every team on the schedule. And then you saw it even in the national playoffs, how dynamic he is. And when you know that there's not much else there than one guy, you can usually take that one guy away. Ashton Jeanty's a different one guy.
It's going to be really interesting how he does, and I think we're all looking forward to seeing how he does in a Raiders jersey in what is a tough division in that AFC West. We talked about Pete Carroll at the start of the episode. I mean, he comes in, had a year out of the league. Obviously had a great time with Seattle. But there was that feeling towards the end of his time in Seattle. It felt like he was going a bit stale. I know he got the comeback player of the year with Geno Smith, and the following year didn't quite work out as well as they hoped. Obviously, still, he had 1 7-9 season, but he still had a 9-8 season in his final year. But how are you feeling about him? Because on the one hand, you know, a new team, a new voice, and he could go back to his old self, you know. But because I think part of him going stale is maybe familiar surroundings, new surroundings. Maybe he'll get more energy, and maybe fresh voices all they need. But on the other hand, he is 73. His coaching style did get slightly outdated towards the end of his time. But then, since he left the league, the running back has come back in fashion again. Saquon Barkley had a great year. Derrick Henry's defying his age. Josh Jacobs had a great year. Many, many others. So the running back position has sort of gone from being devalued to being valued again. I think we're seeing a lot of running backs getting paid now once again. How are you feeling about Pete Carroll coming in his first year with the Raiders?
I think there's a couple of things you gotta remember when you're talking about Pete Carroll, right? First of all, don't get hung up on the fact he's 72 or 3 years old, because if you know Pete at all, and if you've ever been around Pete, number one thing that's going to strike you is how just his energy level, the way he lives his life is full speed all the time, positive, all of that. the other thing to remember is this is a guy who has built football teams at a number of stops, right? Whether it was, he actually had, decent success with the Jets, and then, went to college football and rebuilt a program at USC and turned it into a dynasty. Got the Seahawks to 2 Super Bowls. Probably should have been, everybody talks about that play with Marshawn Lynch. And certainly I think if he gets an opportunity to get back to a Super Bowl, and it's, we're on second, you're on the goal line with a minute left to go in the game, I think that Ashton Jeanty is going to see the ball. But I don't think that defined Pete's career. I think the thing when you look at a guy's career over time, it's what he's been able to do at numerous stops, and he's been successful. He knows the formula, right? You've got to be big and strong and physical. You have to have the ability to run the football. It's really, really difficult. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles proved it to the world last year. It's really difficult, even if you have an elite player at quarterback against you, if you make that team one-dimensional and you can get to the quarterback, then you've got a chance to succeed. Because the best player in football, and that's what I consider Patrick Mahomes, looked very, very average in the Super Bowl against Philadelphia. You look at the Raiders, and to me, I think this is the thing with Pete. The players are going to believe what he's selling, right? Now, this is no knock on Antonio Pierce, right? This is just the facts. Antonio Pierce had never been a head coach in his life, not anywhere, any place. He'd been a player, right? And he was a great player. And that's all good, right? But the guy who sits in the corner office, right, the head coach, if he's if he's a Super Bowl winner, the players get it. They understand. He knows what it takes. He's been there and done it. He can take us back there. And I think that's the biggest thing, that he brings that gravitas, that kind of cachet, if you will, of what he's done. His resume speaks for itself. Then you're around him and you see how positive he is, right? There's a tendency in his business, because it's a very difficult, hard business, and it requires long hours, and it's a brutal grind for 18 weeks and all of that. You can tend to get negative, right? And the everything kind of gets to be, the food's not quite good, and you find every reason in the world to complain. Pete's not that way. And it's not like he's some Pollyanna, but he just sees the good. And, one of his favorite sayings is, catch him doing it right. Right. Not catch him doing it wrong, catch him doing it right. And I think this Raiders team is ready to take that message. Now, every message gets stale at some point. The great John Madden, who was the head coach of the Raiders and won Super Bowls in Oakland, retired very, very early in his life, and then went into broadcasting. And he said, there comes a point, in his mind it was 6 years, there comes a point where the players just don't hear you anymore, right? And that's I think true. And for Pete, this is a fresh start and a fresh message. And I think when you look at, if you go on some of the YouTube sites and that, you see his kind of almost playfulness at practice, right? He's wrestling with the guys, he's out there running around, and I think that has really resonated with this team. It's got to be fun. If it's not fun, it's brutal, right? And I've talked to guys that I know that have played and coached at New England when they won Super Bowls, and they said they didn't have any fun, right? They had fun on Sunday when they won, but there wasn't much fun in that building. And so, I think that's what Pete's going to bring, is a different approach. Now, are they talented enough? That's another question, right? Because I look at a team like this, Andy. start with your quarterback. Is he good enough? I'm not sure that, I'm just not sure that Geno can be more than a bridge quarterback, right? He can get you to the next draft. He can get you to the next free agent signing, but I don't know if he can get you to a Super Bowl, right? That's an area. He's better than what they had. He's an upgrade over Gardner Minshew. He's an upgrade, over O'Connell, right? I think there's no question about that. He's resurrected his career. You saw moments of really, really good quarterback play in Seattle. Then every once in a while, he'd fall back into the Geno that we saw with the Jets. But I think he's learned from his time on the bench, and he's certainly going to be an upgrade for, the Raiders. And then the next thing is I say, okay, now where are my elite players? Who are the elite players on our team? Because you got to have some elite players. You can't just have all good guys. You got to have some superstars. Well, Max Crosby's the first place you look. Now, I heard Patrick Mahomes say this last week. He called Max Crosby the best pass rusher he's ever played against. That's tall praise from the best quarterback in the league. So Max Crosby is not only a great player, Max Crosby's a great story. Max Crosby was a guy who suffered with addiction, with alcoholism, all kinds of issues in his life, cleaned himself up, and he's from Eastern Michigan, right? He doesn't look like, he looks like a stork. He doesn't look like, like some sleek, racy, muscular edge rusher. But he's got a kind of a slinkiness to him and a suppleness to him that he's really an incredible player and has an absolute motor that will not stop, right? There's an elite player. And then you go on that same defensive line, you look inside, and Christian Wilkins, who as a Dolphins fan, great character guy and a great player, right? So now you've got two elite players in the defensive line. Go to the back, go behind those guys, and I'm not sure there's an elite player. A Landon Roberts and compared to Spillane, I take Spillane personally, right? Pratt, I think, gives them a will linebacker that's been there, done that. I think he just kind of wore out his welcome a little bit in Cincinnati. He's a fiery, competitive guy that, not an elite player, but a good player. And then, the secondary is what bothers me, right? You see, they did go out and get Chin. I think Chin will be a good player for them. Eric Stokes came in from Green Bay. He'll be a good player for them. Their secondary is going to have to perform, right? I think that the offensive line on the offensive side of the ball is going to have to perform. The secondary on the defensive side of the ball is going to have to perform at a level, at their highest level is the way I would describe it. They do have, in addition to Jeanty, maybe as good a young tight end as there is in the game in Brock Bowers. And what can Brock Bowers become? Boy, I think the future is really out there for him. He is a very similar, he reminds me of a young Travis Kelce, right? And he might be a better athlete than Travis was as a young player. I think he may run a little better. So they got depth at tight end too, because they got another first rounder at tight end. And when you look at that, when you start getting into multiple tight end sets against a team that can run the football, and Bowers will block you. He's a much better blocker than Kelce was early in his career. So, Travis just kind of gotten away. Bowers will compete and block you. That was one of the things when he came out of Georgia, everybody talked about his receiving skills, and rightly so. But you saw him go in and he stick his nose in there and he'll try and block you. So, I think those are positive signs for the Raiders. And I think that, can they win the division? I don't think so. Can they be a factor in the division? Yes. The reason I don't think they can win the division is you've got the best quarterback in football in the division. You've got really a Broncos team that is I think, done a tremendous job under Sean Payton of getting their house in order. And they've got a fine young quarterback who seems to really thrive in that offense. And then you go out and you got the Chargers. So it's a tough division. The Raiders might finish last and still be much better than they've been in the past. But I think the Raiders have the ability, if they play well, to rise up and beat anybody in that division. And with a couple of injuries, I mean, you take Justin Herbert out of the equation in Los Angeles with the Chargers, if he would get hurt, or Mahomes would get hurt in Kansas City, or those teams are going to struggle. And so that's why they, as we say in football, that's why we play the games. That's why that's why you go to the next game on your schedule, because you just don't know.
Exactly, and it's a tough division for that secondary. It's going to be a big old test, but I think you're right. I mean, I think in terms of the division, I think you'd be crazy to say they'd win it, but I think certainly they can make an impact on the overall standings. They got the Chiefs in the final week. I mean, that could have a massive implication on the overall 1 seed or the 2 seed. And if the Ravens get the 1 seed over them or someone like that, and they got to play the Chiefs at home in the AFC Championship game, that Raiders loss could come back to bite them. So I think, even if they don't win the division, I'm expecting them to get more wins and have an impact on even something like the Broncos and Chargers are trying to get the 7th seed or the 6th seed, and they have to win it. They're 1 game away from making it, and they lose to the Raiders as part of that. Then I think they have a real impact when it comes to that as well. And you mentioned Bowers. I mean, just want to touch on some of the records he set in 2024 for a rookie. So he played all 17 games through the 2024 season and led the team in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns for 112 catches and 1,194 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. These receptions and receiving yards were the most amongst any tight end in the league overall in 2024. He was an first team All-Pro, and he broke an all-time record set by Mike Ditka in 1961 for the most receiving yards by a rookie tight end, and also the most league receptions by a rookie in any position, which was previously set by Puka Nacua a year before, and also the most receptions for Raider since Darren Waller's 107 in 2020. So, quite a season for him. And I think he's already stated his claim in just 1 year as a top 5 tight end in the league. You could easily make a case for a top 3 tight end. I do think he has potential to be that good. And I think that you think about, if it's not Geno Smith, if they get a quarterback in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, a tight end, they call it a quarterback's best friend. And I think having a connection like Mahomes had with Kelsey or many others like this, and I think having a tight end as good as that to throw to for whoever's the quarterback in 3 years' time, if Bowers continues to develop, continues to get better as a tight end, I do feel like, the Raiders are in a good place, even if the division may be quite tough for them.
Well, I think you're right. And I think one of the things that we have to remember when we consider, all of the things that you talked about with Brock Bowers, that's a phenomenal year. That's the best year, rookie year, any tight end in the history of the National Football League has had. Ever, right? Now, remember this. That was with a team that had very, very average quarterback play, right? Minshew struggled. Obviously, O'Connell struggled. They didn't have a dominant guy around him to take the pressure off him. So when it got to be 3rd and long, you just double the tight end to try and take, and he still, in spite of double teams, in spite of being schemed, in spite of they tried to knock him off at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they tried everything with the kid. He had over 100 receptions as a rookie, and it wasn't Patrick Mahomes. It wasn't Tom Brady. It wasn't Dan Marino. It wasn't, John Elway. It wasn't Peyton Manning throwing the ball. It was Garner, Minshew, and O'Connell. And that's really impressive to me.
I think that if it was any play in the whole season that defined the quarterback struggles for the Raiders, it was that game against the Chiefs around Christmas time, where they had a chance to win it late on in the game, and O'Connell fumbled the ball, and it was just that for me was just, if it wasn't already written on the wall that he was going to be, not a Raider starter next year, I think that moment against the Chiefs late on when they could have beaten them. I think that I want to say it was a Thursday night game or maybe a Friday. I think it might have been a Black Friday game, I believe, against the Chiefs. But yeah, that moment there was that was a definite sign that they needed to move on if it wasn't already a sign there. Now, before we head on to our win-loss tie section, now we asked our last guest a question to be asked by our next guest, which is you. So our last guest was Luke Campbell in our Chicago Bears season preview. Now, he asked me to ask our next guest. He asked which head coach you feel is the most likely to get fired first in 2025. Jeff,
Whoa.
who you going for?
This is like hard for me because, I've been there. I know what it feels like. So I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I think the guys that are right now, I think have to have good years. I think Raheem Morris in Atlanta, the jury's out there. They should be better. They should win that division, right? And if they don't, I'm not sure he's going to get fired, but I think that's one where you got to look at it and you go, that's a tough one. I think as you look around the league, and I'm just trying to do this in a Rolodex in my mind, do I think there could be a one and done? Maybe Dallas, right? I mean, because Dallas is just such and not because of, not because of the coach, but because the Dallas is just such a, drama pit, right? You don't know what's going on there. I think you look at the NFC North, and I don't think anything's happening in Detroit. Chicago should be better. Minnesota's not going to. I mean, that if they're crazy, if they make a change, I think Cincinnati's one that has a potential to go. I think they have to do better. They've got to get their defense fixed, and they got to play better. They got too good a quarterback and too many good weapons on offense to not make the playoffs. Pittsburgh is another one that I would say, what is Pittsburgh going to do? If Pittsburgh is, they've invested heavily in this season, right? They got a 40-some-year-old quarterback. They go out and get one of the top receivers, DK Metcalf, great receiver. They've said now, and Jalen Ramsey trade to get Jalen Ramsey. They pushed all the chips in the middle of the table because you're not making those. You're not signing Aaron Rodgers for the future. You're not, trading Minkah Fitzpatrick for Jalen Ramsey, thinking about the future. You're thinking about 1 year. And so it looks to me like, now they don't fire coaches much in Pittsburgh. That's just historically the way it has been. But I think that's one to watch. I think the Giants is certainly one that you better watch because, again, I think they're going to be better, but they've been bad. That's a proud organization. They don't like being bad. And, they're in a tough division. Washington's going to be better. The Cowboys should be better. And certainly Philadelphia's a world champion. So they've got the deck stacked against them too. So those are kind of the ones just right off the top of my head without preparing for the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Brian Dable one is for me. It's that for me is one I think I would look to straight away because I think whilst he's been dealt a bad hand with quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff, it's been a long time for them. He's been in charge for 3-4 seasons now, and I think at some point they will probably look elsewhere if they struggle once again. So Jeff, you now have the responsibility of asking our next guest a question. So Jeff, what is your question for our next guest?
All right, I think a great, and I know what direction we're supposed to go with the next guest, but I'm going to make this a little broader so that anybody can take it. 2 years ago in college football, J.J. McCarthy led Michigan to a national championship. The Vikings brought him in as the future of the program. He tore his knee up in preseason. He's now been anointed, basically given the starting job. Is he talented enough to get the Minnesota Vikings over the hump that is the Detroit Lions in the NFC Central?
I love that question. And I've got a lot of thoughts on JJ McCarthy myself. I want to save them a little bit for our season predictions at the end of August. And I did touch on it a little bit when we ranked quarterbacks from 1 to 32. So, yeah, I don't want to give my hand away too much, but I've got a lot of feelings on McCarthy. And I will tell you these off camera, Jeff, as well. But we're going to head to our final section, which is going to be our win-loss-tie section. Now, of course, you came on a year ago for our 2024 season preview. Can you remember what record you had predicted for your Raiders a year ago?
If I remember correctly, it's somewhere around 8 wins, I think. I think.
Well, Raiders went 4-13 in 2024. You went for 11 wins.
Well, that's why you don't ask fans those kinds of questions. You know what, and I don't think, and I think there was so much anticipation after the Raiders had gone into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs, and we had seen that they were kind of like getting a little of that Raiders swagger back, but and then they go out and get Christian Wilkins, and you're thinking, well, Minshew's won games, but it just really fell apart on him, and then I think it kind of caved in inside the building. I think obviously there was a lot of stuff going on in that building, and here's the thing: when you're in a team sport, and certainly. I think how many other sports, I can't think of any really, where you have 65 guys in a room, in a building, right? And you've got 20 coaches and 20 trainers and, front office people and all that. And you have to get everybody pulling in the same direction. And that's extremely difficult to do because every one of those players is an alpha male. Every one of those players is being told by their wife, by their agent, by their friends, you're not getting paid enough, you're not getting enough publicity, you're not, and coaches are climbing over one another for the next job, and it's so hard to manage it and keep it all going the same way. And then you get a young guy like Antonio was in his first head coaching job, in a situation where he's not good enough at the critical positions, and it can go sideways on you really fast. And once it goes sideways, it is really hard to get it back on the tracks because there's so much noise around you, right? And I really wish that fans understood this, Andy. There's so much noise, right? Now, you can insulate the players inside the building, but remember, they go home, right? And they listen to ESPN and they watch Pro Football Talk and they go to restaurants and people come up to them and say, what's wrong with you? Or you stink or what? It's just constant. In the old days, it wasn't like that because we didn't have 24/7 talk sports, right? Now, it's great because it gives all of us a forum and a format to talk about the teams we love, but it makes it incredibly difficult to keep a team focused and all going in the same direction, right? And I don't think that I think this is, I think I know enough about what went on in that building that from the inside out, the thing collapsed. Right, and when it collapses on the inside, then you got no chance on the outside.
Yeah, and I think certainly it was a honeymoon period that came to an end quite quickly in the 2024 season. But moving on to 2025 and our win-loss-tie section, our first game for the Raiders is actually another one of Pete Carroll's old teams in the Patriots as he travels to New England in his first game as head coach. Win, loss, or tie?
I'm going to say it's a loss because I think New England's going to be better with Mike Vrabel, and it's Vrabel's first game back in New England.
I agree. I think when we had our Bills episodes in the first of the 32 teams, we covered this off season, and I was saying that, you know what, talking about maybe the last game, a high mark could be the final game of the regular season because injuries could happen, and they were saying that, oh, that mean Miami win the division. And I think if the Bills had an injury hit season, Josh Allen was down for the year, I still think the Patriots will win it. I think they're going to have a great year. So I think Mike Vrabel's a great head coach. I think he was harshly treated in Tennessee. And I think, yeah, they're going to be certainly a strong team when it comes to maybe not a playoff like deep run, but I think they can certainly get into the playoffs as a wildcard team. So yeah, I think they're going to be a good team. Next up is Pete's first game at home as a Raiders head coach, and it's against a division rival in the Los Angeles Chargers. Jeff, win, loss, or tie?
I'm gonna say that's a win. I think the Raiders at home. Again, we'll see whether this where this Charger team goes in second year under Harbaugh. But I think, home field advantage is so important in the National Football League, right? When I worked for Coach Vermeil, one of the things he taught us was that, a home, just across the board, it's a 3-point advantage playing at home, right? And then some places it becomes a bigger advantage because if you're at home, if you're the Saints and you're at home, and if you're the Chiefs, if you're in Arrowhead, if you're the Raiders and you're in that building, that's a tough environment to play. And it'll be the first game of Pete's, show in Vegas.
Yeah, it's going to be one hell of a showing. And I believe, if I'm right, that is Monday Night Football. If I'm right in saying it, it's ESPN, 7 p.m. Eastern. I think that is Monday Night Football. Week 3 is another road game against the surprise story of last season, a team who were 4 quarters away from making the Super Bowl. You're taking on the Washington Commanders. Win, loss, or tie?
I think that's, again, a loss. It's a very difficult trip when you go from the West Coast, which really, Vegas is 3 hours from LA driving, so it's a West Coast team. You go from the West Coast to the East Coast is very difficult travel. Your body clocks are different. You're playing a 1 o'clock game. That's like 7 in the morning in Las Vegas, so you got to deal with that. And then I think also that, whenever you look at a football game, and again, here we go again, we're talking about that one position. You got to start with the quarterbacks. Who has the edge at quarterback? And certainly I think the Commanders would have an edge over the Raiders there. So I'm going to take the Commanders.
And then week 4 is a team we had on last episode, the Chicago Bears at home. Win, loss, or tie?
I like their chances against the Bears. I gotta see, and I'm a big fan of Ben Johnson. I'm a big fan, but I gotta see the Bears actualize all this offseason hype that they've had this year. And I think, again, Caleb has got to grow up, and again, that'll be a tough environment for the Bears to come into the Raiders' home field and beat the Raiders. I'll take the Raiders.
Okay, so week 5 is a game on the road in Indianapolis as you take on the Colts.
I like our chances against the Colts. Again, how much has Richardson improved, right? If he's not better, I just got done doing a study on some NFL guys the other day, and I watched a lot of Colts film, and just not there yet. I mean, he is super talented. He is a tremendous, maybe the best athlete in the league at that position, but it doesn't translate right now into efficiency at the position that you got to be efficient at, and that's quarterback.
Yeah, I think at that point we'll see Daniel Jones more likely than Richardson, if I'm honest. I think the injury is coming again as talk he may not be fit for the start of the season, and I think, I do think the tapping out of the game has had an impact long term on his Colts future. I do believe that potentially Steichen would move on if he had the chance. But week 6, another AFC South team as you're taking on at home the Tennessee Titans.
This is, I think, where the Raiders get a little bit of juice going. Right now, they beat Indianapolis. right? They beat Chicago at home. This could be 3 straight for the Raiders. And if, to be real honest with you, if the Raiders need to get healthy at this part of their schedule, because they've got Kansas City twice coming, they've got Denver twice coming. They got to go to the Chargers. They got the toughest part of their schedule coming. So this stretch right in here, where you got 3 teams that you should be able to compete with, I think they need to win this game, and I think they will.
Well, in week 7, you go from playing the worst team in the AFC last season to the AFC champions on the road against the Chiefs.
Too much right now for the Raiders to take on, and this is, you know what, it's funny, when I was in Kansas City, I remember just how much everybody hated the Raiders. And I mean, this is a blood rivalry. This is one of the best rivalries in the National Football League. And it goes back to the 60s. And so, this will be an electric environment. I hope that game is one of the featured games that weekend on television.
Well, having been to that exact game at the exact same stadium, I can vouch for how loud Raiders Chiefs is in our head. It's an experience I will never really forget. But week 8, you got a bye week, so week 9, you're back on the AFC South best as you take on the Jacksonville Jaguars at home.
I think they can beat Jacksonville. Jacksonville, here's the thing with Jacksonville, to me, Andy. Jacksonville gave that quarterback all that money, right? And they really haven't got much back on their investment. And, that's the danger of, you want to get out in front of, the contract, right? Because they don't get cheaper, right? So they made a decision to give him a deal that was a great deal. But he's not played up to that deal yet. And now, can he? I hope so, right? But he's got to do that. And Jacksonville, I think, is one of those franchises that, is challenged with a history of not fulfilling the promise that they have had, right? They've had some really good teams on paper, but they haven't been able to, since Tom Coughlin, really been able to, translate it into wins.
So week 10, you're on the road against the Denver Broncos.
I just think Denver's too good for Oakland right now, or for Las Vegas right now, because you look at that defense that Denver can play, and then you got a young quarterback who, I mean, Sean Payton did a great job last year with him. You look at, he's a kid that he kind of had a little bit of a checkered evaluation. Some people really liked him. Some people said, he's overrated. He's da-da-da-da, right? Can he move the ball down the field? I'm going to tell you something. I thought he played extremely well in that system and played inside the system. He's got talent all over the field around him. They're physical in the offensive line. I think Denver's a good football team.
I agree. Week 11 is another home game, I should say, this time against the Dallas Cowboys.
George, you look at what they did this offseason, right? You got to get another guy opposite your number one. You needed a second receiver. They needed one. And they went out and got a very talented guy who is also a big pain in the ass, right? And so if Pickens can play up to his ability, they could move the ball on anybody, because they're good at tight end. They're not great at tight end. They're good at tight end. They help their running game, right? They went out and got some guys that are going to help them in the running game. I think their offensive line is better than people give them credit for. I just don't know about what happens when Pickens he goes 2 weeks where he doesn't play very well or doesn't get the ball enough or whatever? Is he going to do what he did in Pittsburgh, which was basically – I have never seen a receiver just stop playing in the middle of a game. I mean, Antonio Brown walked off the field, right? But this guy just stopped playing, wouldn't run a route, just stood on the line of scrimmage, right? And that is so I'm not a fan of his because that's, to me, is the ultimate disrespect to the game. And, you know, those guys he's talented. He has got a ton of ability. That's why he's in Dallas, right? But it's the reasons that he got out of Pittsburgh that I worry about if I'm the Cowboys, right? And how's he going to coexist with CeeDee Lamb? There's only one football, right? And Dak's going to have to get them both the ball.
So then going on to week 12, now my laptop is actually low on battery. So whilst I go and get my Mac charger, let me know whether you think the Raiders will win, lose, or tie against the Cleveland Browns.
Against the Browns, I think they can beat the Browns. I think the Browns are, you know, Browns may surprise people a little bit. There's so many questions swirling around the Browns right now about the quarterback. Who's it going to be? And, you know, I think Flacco is probably the answer to start the season. But at this point, we're talking about week 12. Will we see Garrett Gabriel? Will we see Shedeur Sanders? Will Joe Flacco still be in charge? So I think that's going to be the one. And I think that's uncertainty right there would make me say take the Raiders.
So then in week 13, you do take on, now we're talking about the Los Angeles Chargers on the road.
Yeah, that's tough. That's going to be a tough get. And again, if like I said, unless, you know, if Herbert's in the lineup, I think that, you know, the Chargers, frankly, are McConkey, and, you know, the Chargers, good football team. And I think Harbaugh, you know, this will be a great game. I think these two coaches paired up against each other, I think we're going to see a really good football team, or good football game. But I'm going to take the Chargers at home.
Okay, so then week 14, you're back at home, once again the AFC West, but this time against the Denver Broncos.
I just think Denver is significantly better team right now than the Raiders are. I think it'll be a close game because it's at home in Las Vegas, but I would take Denver.
And then week 15, you've gone from facing in week 7 the Super Bowl runners-up, and then you're playing in week 15 on the road against the Super Bowl champions in the Philadelphia Eagles, win, loss, or tie.
That's a loss. Philadelphia is really, really good and really, really physical.
Now, I've got to ask you about it because it has been something I've been thinking about recently. Is Saquon Barkley's on the Madden cover, and you know, there's not a good trend in recent years with players on the Madden cover now. And obviously they've lost Kellen Moore as well as the OC. Do you think that all that combined could mean maybe they have a tiny little Super Bowl hangover?
Well, Andy, that's really an interesting question because, you know, the guys that I know that have coached and won Super Bowl games and guys that I know have been through it as a player, they always talk about that's the most difficult year of your career because as a coach, you got to understand you have the shortest off season, right? Yes, you won, but everybody wants to write a book. Everybody wants to go on TV and talk about it. Everybody wants a raise. Everybody wants a new contract. It is really difficult. And so I think there will be a hangover in Philadelphia a little bit. There's been some changes there. I think Howie Roseman is as good as there is as a general manager in the league in terms of roster construction. He's done a phenomenal job. They've lost some veteran players in the secondary that they've got to replace. They lost some guys up front that they've got to replace. Now, the thing that's amazing is, and I remember when I did the Super Bowl last year, I watched the two teams come out of the tunnel, right? And it was like night and day between what the Chiefs looked like physically and what came out of that Philadelphia tunnel, right? Now, Chris Jones could walk out of the tunnel with King Kong and he'd look the part, right? But I'm telling you, the Eagles are big, and lean and long and strong and nasty. And, you look at the offensive line, you got Lane Johnson on one side, who's 6, whatever he is. He's 300 pounds. He looks like if you see him, he looks like he weighs 250, right? He's really, there's no fat on him. He's really a good looking athlete. Then you go over on the other side, and that guy's even bigger, Jordan Mailata, and he looks like a tight end. He's built that long body, and then the Chiefs waddle out of the locker room, and you look at their offensive line. Creed Humphrey's got his belly hanging over his pants, and I just think that the formula for the game today, the way the game is played today, the Eagles have the formula, right? You got to be long, you got to be athletic, you got to be able to run, you got to be able to get to the passer. And they blitzed Mahomes one time in the Super Bowl and beat him up, right? So, that's I think they're the best team in football until somebody beats them.
I agree. And I think going back to the Super Bowl, I think one thing I found when I was there in New Orleans, it felt so much like an Eagles game. It felt like a home game in Philly, because when you're walking around the city, when you're doing stuff in media and you're walking around, you just heard a lot more Eagles fans making noise than the Chiefs fans. You saw a lot more Eagles fans driving their cars around. You heard a lot more of the Go Birds chants and anything the Chiefs were saying. Don't know whether it's because they've been in it. There was more of a gap between appearances. Maybe, Chiefs in it every year. Eagles had a 2 or 3 year gap away from it. Don't know whether that played any part in it. But yeah, I certainly found that when I was around the city during the week and leading up to the game, it just felt like I was going to a Philly home game. And I think you certainly felt that in the stadium as well, just how loud the Eagles fans and just how much more of green I saw than red in the crowd.
Man, let me just say this. I lived in Philadelphia during the Buddy Ryan years, right? And those were good teams, good Eagles teams, not great Eagles teams, right? They made the playoffs but never got to a Super Bowl. It didn't matter. Every Sunday in Philadelphia, there's only one thing, and it ain't church. It's the Eagles. I'm just telling you, they are crazy, those fans. Crazy.
Insane fan base, a great fan base, one of the best in the NFL, and you gotta love them. Week 16, the Raiders' final road game of the regular season in Week 16 against the Houston Texans.
Boy. This one's really hard to call because it's so late in the year and so many things could be in play right now. Injuries, playoff runs. Where are the Texans right now? Have they clinched the AFC South? Are they going to rest players? There's a lot of reasons why this one would be a really tough one to pick. But I just think if you go on records, you go on where it's at, you go on the quarterbacks, you go on the talent on the two rosters, I'd take the Texans.
Okay, so then Week 17 is a home game against the New York Giants.
That's one for us. That's a W for the Raiders.
And then finally, Week 18, a game that could have massive implications on the 1 seed or even the division against the Chiefs at home.
I think this game's going to be a big one because I think what's going to happen in the West, in the AFC West, is Denver and Kansas City are going to be they are going to be neck and neck right now. And this game is going to either going to determine the champion of the West or it's going to determine the first seed in the AFC playoffs. So I think again, this is a game that the Chiefs are going to need. And I think the Chiefs will, do it.
So in the end, going by your predictions in this episode, the Raiders will finish with an 8-9 record, which you would think probably doesn't make the playoffs unless there's a miracle and they make it in. But does that represent progress? I mean, you had 5 wins a year before to almost double your tally for the season. Following that, that all does represent a lot of progress, right?
Yeah, I think that's what, if they can get to 8 wins, I think that's a positive step for the organization. And you got to remember, where's that going to put them in the draft lot, in the draft, hierarchy, because the thing that they've got to see if they can find in this next draft is a quarterback. And so this is going to be a good quarterback year, it looks like, in the draft. And there's certainly more depth of quality quarterbacks in this year's draft than there was in last year's draft. So for the Raiders, I think they're positioned now to either trade up and get one, or to use their first round pick on one. And, there's going to be some good ones out there.
Yeah, and it's going to be, I'm really intrigued where Arch Manning goes. And they say he may not declare for the next draft, but certainly, whether it's 2026 or 2027, I'm really intrigued where he goes. And you're going with a lot of pressure, being the, in the same bloodline as, two great NFL players and three great NFL players, if you include his granddad as well. So, that's a big shoes to fill for Arch Manning, but maybe he'll prove everyone wrong and have a good career. But that is where we will end our Raiders season preview for today. So once again, thank you, Jeff, for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Andy. It's been a pleasure. Every year is a pleasure to come on and talk about the Raiders.
Absolutely love that. And great having you on once again, and hope to get you on during the season at some point. But in the meantime, this has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast with, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, and our guest today, Jeff Reinebold. And we'll see you guys for our next team season preview. See you then.